My name is Melanie Parker, 32, trauma surgeon at Boston Memorial Hospital. I've saved countless lives but couldn't save myself from the whispers when I walked into my sister Kimberly's wedding alone. Poor thing, they said. Champagne glasses clinking. I almost left after hearing Andrew's family mock me near the kitchen. Then something extraordinary happened. The bride's grandfather slowly stood from his seat, bowed deeply before me, and the entire room fell silent. Before I tell you what he said, where are you watching from? Hit subscribe, and like if you've ever had family members underestimate your worth, I promise this story's ending will make your day. Growing up, Kimberly and I took different paths. Though only 3 years younger, my sister always possessed the social grace I lacked. While I buried myself in textbooks, she flourished at parties. When we were teenagers, I'd stay up studying biology while she practiced makeup techniques. By college, our divergence was complete. I disappeared into medical school while she built an impressive network of friends and connections. Don't misunderstand, I loved my sister fiercely. We just measured success differently. My victories came in the form of perfect test scores, research publications, and eventually lives saved on my operating table. Hers came through relationships, both personal and professional. When Kimberly met Andrew Miller 2 years ago, I was genuinely happy for her. He worked in finance, came from old money, and seemed to adore my sister. Their courtship was swift and glamorous, weekends in the Hamptons, holidays in Europe, and finally a proposal at sunset on his family's yacht. The ring was enormous, the announcement tasteful yet prominent in the society pages. "You'll be my maid of honor, of course," Kimberly told me over brunch, flashing her 5-carat diamond, "and Mom says you absolutely must bring someone this time." This time, the words stung more than they should have. At my cousin's wedding last year, I'd attended solo after a promising relationship fizzled weeks before my date to another family wedding canceled last minute. These things happen, but in my family they happen to me with disappointing regularity. "I'll see what I can do," I said, knowing full well my 80-hour work weeks left little time for romance. The pressure mounted as the wedding date approached. My mother called weekly with suggestions, her friend's nephew, a divorced dermatologist, even my high school lab partner who'd recently moved back to Boston. "I'm not bringing a stranger to Kim's wedding just to have a +1. I insisted that it reflects poorly on the family," my mother sighed. "People will talk." I tried, I really did. I reactivated my dormant dating profiles, accepted setups from well-meaning friends, even flirted with a radiologist at work. But each prospect faded against the reality of my schedule. Emergency surgeries don't respect dinner reservations or second dates. What my family failed to understand was that I had built something meaningful. By 32, I'd become the youngest female trauma surgeon at Boston Memorial. I published research that changed emergency protocols nationwide. Just last month, I performed a rarely successful emergency thoracotomy that saved a 19-year-old after a horrific car accident. "But are you happy, dear?" my mother would ask, as though my professional achievements were consolation prizes for a barren personal life. Maybe that's why I finally decided to attend Kimberly's wedding alone and unapologetically. No last-minute Tinder date. No convenient friend masquerading as a romantic interest. Just me, Dr. Melanie Parker, trauma surgeon, sister of the bride, chronically single. "The Millers are very traditional," Kimberly warned when I confirmed I'd be coming solo. "They might not understand." "I'm not ashamed of who I am," I told her, though part of me wondered if I was trying to convince myself. The drive to Newport, Rhode Island took nearly 2 hours from Boston. As my modest Volvo navigated the increasingly opulent neighborhoods, my confidence began to waver. The Miller estate appeared like something from a period film: sprawling waterfront property, manicured gardens, and a mansion that probably had a name rather than just an address. The valet looked slightly confused when I emerged from my car alone, then quickly masked it with professional courtesy. I smoothed my navy blue dress, elegant but not showy, and handed him my keys. "Welcome to Windermere," he said, confirming my suspicion that the house indeed had a name. "Are you with the bride or groom?" "The bride," I said. "I'm her sister." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "The maid of honor. Everyone's been looking forward to meeting you." I doubted that very much, but I smiled and headed toward the imposing front doors, already dreading the weekend ahead.
The Miller estate was even more intimidating up close. Windermere stood 3 stories tall, its limestone exterior gleaming in the late afternoon sun. Ivy climbed strategically placed trellises, and massive planters overflowed with arrangements too perfect to be anything but professionally designed. Through massive windows, I glimpsed crystal chandeliers and artwork that probably belonged in museums. A uniformed staff member greeted me at the door. "Name, please." "Melanie Parker," I said, suddenly conscious of my sensible overnight bag beside designer luggage in the foyer. She consulted her tablet. "Dr. Parker, yes, we have you in the hydrangea suite." Her finger hovered over the screen. "And your guest will be." "No guest," I said, forcing a smile. "Just me." "Oh," she tapped something quickly. "I'll need to inform the kitchen all the place settings are for couples." She said this as though I'd created a significant inconvenience. "I'm sorry about that," I replied, though I wasn't sure why I was apologizing. "Amanda will show you to your room." Rehearsal dinner begins at 7 in the garden pavilion. Amanda, barely 20 and dressed in the same discreet uniform, led me up a sweeping staircase. "The hydrangea suite is lovely," she offered kindly. "It has a view of the rose garden." The room was indeed beautiful, with a canopy bed and furnishings that probably cost more than a month of my salary. I thanked Amanda, tipped her, wondering immediately if that was appropriate at a private residence, and began unpacking. I just finished hanging my dress for tomorrow's ceremony when a knock came at the door. Kimberly burst in, looking radiant in a white cocktail dress, her hair already styled for the evening. "You made it," she exclaimed, hugging me tightly. "How was the drive? Did you see the boathouse?" Andrew's grandfather commissioned it in the 1960s. "The drive was fine," I said. "Everything's beautiful, Kim." She beamed. "Wait until you meet everyone. Andrew's parents are eager to get to know you." I dotted that too, but nodded enthusiastically. "We should head down," she continued. "Eleanor, Andrew's mother, is very punctual." Downstairs, the great room had transformed into a reception area. Well-dressed guests mingled, champagne flutes in hand. I recognized no one. "There you are, darling." A tall, immaculately groomed woman approached, air-kissing Kimberly. This had to be Eleanor Miller, wearing what appeared to be a designer dress and enough diamonds to fund a small hospital wing. "Eleanor, this is my sister Melanie," Kimberly said. Eleanor's eyes performed a swift assessment. "The doctor. How dedicated you must be to your profession." Her emphasis suggested this was not entirely a compliment. "George, come meet Kimberly's sister." George Miller, silver-haired and imposing in a tailored suit, joined us. "Ah, the mysterious sister. We were beginning to think you might not exist." He chuckled at his own joke. "My schedule can be unpredictable," I explained. "But I wouldn't miss Kim's wedding." "Of course not," Eleanor said. "Will your friend be joining us later?" The hesitation made clear what she was really asking. "I came alone," I said simply. "Oh." Eleanor exchanged a glance with her husband. "Well, that's modern." Before I could respond, Kimberly gently steered me toward another group. "Let me introduce you to Andrew's cousins." The next hour passed in a blur of introductions and small talk. Each conversation inevitably included the question of who I had come with, followed by a microsecond of awkward silence when I explained I was solo. By the time we moved toward the garden pavilion for dinner, I'd heard numerous variations of Married to Your Work and just haven't found the right one. A particularly bold and asked if I'd considered freezing my eggs. As we entered the pavilion, I noticed an elderly man watching me with interest. Unlike the others, his gaze held no judgment, just curiosity. He nodded slightly when our eyes met, and I returned the gesture. The seating chart placed me at what was clearly the singles table, a collection of distant cousins, friends' siblings, and other miscellaneous guests without partners. We were positioned far from the main family tables, almost an afterthought. Dinner began with speeches celebrating the couple. Andrew's best man told stories of their college adventures, while his father spoke of family traditions and legacies. When my turn came, I spoke of Kimberly's compassion and how she'd always seen the best in people. I didn't mention how that quality seemed to be rare among her new family. Between courses, I excused myself, needing a moment away from forced conversation. I found a quiet spot near the kitchen entrance, taking deep breaths of the cool evening air. That's when I heard them. Voices just inside the service door. Poor Kimberly, having her sister show up alone. It's rather embarrassing, a woman's voice said. Did you see her shoes? Practical. Dead giveaway she's single. A man responded with a laugh. My cheeks burned. I recognized the voices as belonging to Jessica and Thomas, Andrew's cousins who I'd been introduced to earlier. Well, she's a surgeon or something. Probably no time for dating, Jessica continued. Or personality, Thomas added. Did you try talking to her? Like chatting with a textbook? I stepped back, intending to flee when the kitchen door swung open. Eleanor Miller emerged, stopping short when she saw me. Melanie, I was just... She glanced back toward the kitchen where Jessica and Thomas had fallen silent. Looking for more champagne? I was just getting some air, I said, voice tight. Eleanor's smile didn't reach her eyes. You know, dear, it really would have been better if you'd brought someone. These events are designed for couples. It throws off the entire seating arrangement. Behind her, Jessica and Thomas appeared, both freezing when they saw me. Oh, Jessica said. We were just... discussing my shoes? I finished for her. Their faces confirmed they knew I'd overheard. We were just joking around, Thomas said quickly. No offense intended. Thomas is such a tease, Eleanor added smoothly. You really mustn't take it personally. I looked between the three of them. These people who would be my sister's family after tomorrow. I should get back to the table, I said, turning away. Melanie, wait, Jessica called. But I continued walking. Kimberly intercepted me before I reached my seat. Everything okay? You look upset. I considered telling her what I'd heard. But what would that accomplish on the eve of her wedding? Just tired from the drive, I lied. You're not thinking of leaving early, are you? She asked, concern mixed with something else. Embarrassment, perhaps? Of course not, I assured her, though the thought had definitely crossed my mind. I'm here for you, Kim. Always. She squeezed my arm gratefully, but I noticed her eyes darting around the room, perhaps checking who might be watching us, who might be judging her sister who couldn't even secure a date for a family wedding. I returned to my table of fellow outcasts, more determined than ever to hold my head high despite the growing knot in my stomach. The rehearsal dinner continued with the precision of a well-orchestrated performance. The pavilion glowed with thousands of tiny lights strung overhead, creating the illusion of dining beneath the stars. White roses and hydrangeas adorned every surface, their perfume mingling with the salt air from the nearby ocean. Waitstaff moved silently between tables, refilling wine glasses and serving course after impeccable course. At my table, conversation remained superficial. The cousin from Seattle discussed real estate prices. A college friend described her recent trip to Portugal. I contributed when appropriate, but found myself increasingly aware of glances from the family tables, curious, pitying, occasionally amused. After the main course, I needed another moment alone. This time, I headed toward a small anteroom that connected the pavilion to the main house. It appeared to be a butler's pantry of sorts, with additional place settings and serving pieces arranged neatly on built-in shelves. I was examining a collection of antique silver when voices approached from the hallway. I can't believe she actually came alone. It was Jessica again. Who does that at a wedding this important? Someone who doesn't understand social cues, Thomas replied. Eleanor says she's always been the odd one. Kimberly's the one with all the charm. Makes you wonder what she's like at work. Can you imagine her bedside manner? Congratulations, you're dying, but at least I have a medical degree. Jessica's imitation was cruel. Her voice pitched high and robotic. They rounded the corner and stopped abruptly upon seeing me. This time, they didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. Oh, it's the surgeon, Jessica said, her smile not reaching her eyes. We were just coming to get some extra napkins. Don't let me interrupt, I said coldly. Thomas moved past me to a drawer, extracting several cloth napkins. Big night tomorrow. Excited to see her sister join the family. His attempt at normal conversation after what I'd just heard felt like another insult. Ecstatic, I replied flatly. The tension might have dissipated if Eleanor hadn't chosen that moment to enter. She assessed the situation immediately, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Everything all right in here?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Just getting supplies," Thomas said, holding up the napkins. Eleanor turned to me. "And you, Melanie?" "Lost?" "Just taking a break," I said. "Large social gatherings can be overwhelming." "Yes, I imagine they would be, for someone unaccustomed to them." She smoothed her already perfect hair. I've always found it curious when people choose careers that so obviously conflict with having a normal life, but I suppose not everyone prioritizes family. The statement hung in the air, its meaning unmistakable. "Some of us prioritize saving lives," I said quietly. "Of course, dear. Very noble." Eleanor's smile was practiced. "Though balance is important, isn't it? Such a shame you couldn't find someone to accompany you this weekend. It would have made things less awkward." Jessica snickered behind her hand. "There's nothing awkward about attending my sister's wedding," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "Of course not," Eleanor said in a tone that suggested exactly the opposite. Though between us, Kimberly was quite concerned. "She mentioned you've had trouble maintaining relationships. Something about your schedule being impossible, or was it your personality? I forget which." The casual cruelty of revealing my sister's private concerns struck like a physical blow. "I doubt Kimberly said that," I managed. "Mom?" Andrew appeared in the doorway, Kimberly beside him. "Dad's looking for you. It's almost time for the cake." Kimberly's eyes darted between us, sensing the tension. "Everything okay?" "Perfectly fine," Eleanor assured her. "We were just having a little girl talk with your sister about how challenging it must be to balance her impressive career with a personal life," Jessica added with false sweetness. Kimberly looked uncomfortable. "Mel's amazing at what she does," she said, but her defense sounded half-hearted. "We were just saying how she must not have time to date," Thomas said, "given her commitment to medicine." "I made a choice," I said, looking directly at my sister. "I'm proud of that choice." "Of course you are, dear," Eleanor said, "and we respect that. Not everyone is cut out for family life." Kimberly shifted awkwardly. "We should get back to the guests," she suggested. As they turned to leave, I heard Jessica whisper to Thomas, "God, can you imagine bringing her to the club? She'd lecture everyone on their cholesterol levels." They left, not bothering to lower their voices. I stood alone in the butler's pantry, hands shaking slightly. Part of me wanted to leave immediately, drive back to Boston in the familiar comfort of the hospital where my worth wasn't measured by my relationship status. But leaving meant abandoning Kimberly, embarrassing her further on her wedding weekend. So I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and returned to the pavilion. For the remainder of the evening, I smiled at the right moments, answered questions politely, and pretended I couldn't see the sideways glances and whispered comments. When the dinner finally concluded, I kissed Kimberly goodnight and retreated to my room, where I lay awake wondering if I should have fought harder to find a date. Any date, just to spare myself this humiliation. Morning arrived with perfect weather, clear blue skies, and a gentle breeze off the ocean. Under different circumstances, I might have appreciated the beauty of Windermere in the daylight, its gardens in full bloom and the water sparkling beyond the manicured lawn. Instead, I steeled myself for the day ahead, applying makeup with surgical precision and styling my hair into an elegant updo that had taken 3 YouTube tutorials to master. My bridesmaid dress, a floor-length silk in pale blue, fit perfectly, the result of 3 fittings that had required rescheduling twice due to emergency surgeries. At 10 o'clock, I joined the other bridesmaids in the estate's east wing, where a suite had been transformed into a bridal preparation area. Professional hairstylists and makeup artists fluttered around Kimberly and her friends while champagne flowed freely. Melanie, finally, Kimberly's college roommate Stephanie, greeted me. "We were just talking about our first dates with our partners. What was yours with O?" Her face fell as she remembered. "Sorry, don't be," I said, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing server. "I have plenty of first date disaster stories, just no current happy ending." The conversation quickly shifted to someone's honeymoon plans. I sipped my drink, observing the easy camaraderie of these women who had known each other for years. Most were married or engaged, their conversations peppered with references to my husband or my fiancé. "Mel, come help me with this," Kimberly called from behind a decorative screen. I found her sitting in her undergarments, her wedding dress hanging nearby. "Cold feet?" I asked, only half joking. As if. She smiled. "But I do need your steady surgeon hands to help with these buttons once I'm in the dress." As I helped her into the gown, an intricate creation of lace and satin that probably cost more than my monthly salary, I was transported back to our childhood. We used to play dress-up in our mother's clothes, Kimberly always the bride, me always the doctor caring for her imaginary children. "Remember when we used to pretend we were getting married?" I asked, working on the tiny pearl buttons along her spine. "You never wanted to be the bride," she recalled. "You were always more interested in giving my dolls operations." We laughed, a moment of genuine connection amidst the day's formality. "Are you okay after last night?" she asked suddenly, meeting my eyes in the mirror. I got the feeling something happened with Eleanor. I hesitated. "Nothing worth discussing today," I said finally. "This is your day." "They can be traditional," Kimberly said carefully. "They don't always understand different choices. My choices are valid too, Kim. I know that." She turned to face me, the dress half-fastened. "I admire what you do, Mel. I always have. But sometimes I think you use your career as a shield, to avoid letting people get close." The observation stung, especially coming from her. "That's not fair." "Maybe not," she conceded. "But I want you to be happy." "I am happy," I insisted, "just differently than you." Before she could respond, the wedding coordinator appeared, clipboard in hand. 30 minutes until we need the bridesmaids downstairs," she announced. Her eyes landed on me. "Dr. Parker, will your guests be seated with the family or with the general guests?" "I don't have a guest," I reminded her. For what felt like the 100th time, right? She made a note. "We'll need to adjust the head table seating again." The rest of the preparation passed in a blur of hairspray, last-minute adjustments, and photographs. Throughout it all, I maintained my composure, even as I overheard bridesmaids speculating on my love life or lack thereof. The ceremony was scheduled for 1 o'clock in the garden. Rows of white chairs faced an elaborate floral arch beyond which the Atlantic Ocean provided a dramatic backdrop. Guests arrived in groups of 2 elegantly dressed couples taking their places on either side of the aisle. As a bridesmaid, I processed alone while the others walked with groomsmen. I felt the weight of eyes following me, heard the subtle murmurs. Head high, I focused on Kimberly's happiness, on playing my role perfectly in her perfect day. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Kimberly looked radiant as our father walked her down the aisle. Andrew beamed at the sight of her. They exchanged traditional vows, and I successfully handed over the ring when prompted, my eyes only briefly catching Eleanor's disapproving glance from the front row. Afterward, during the cocktail hour on the terrace, I circulated as expected, making small talk while avoiding Eleanor, Jessica, and Thomas. I answered polite questions about my work, deflected inquiries about my relationship status, and accepted condescending comments about still having time to find someone. "Such a shame. A pretty girl like you," one of Andrew's aunts commented. "Have you tried that online dating?" "My neighbor's daughter found a husband that way." "I've tried it," I said, for the 10th time that day. "Well, keep at it, dear. No one wants to end up alone." I excused myself, retreating to a quiet corner of the garden. The formal reception would begin soon, and I needed a moment to gather my strength. "Not much of a party person?" a gravelly voice asked. I turned to find the elderly man I'd noticed the previous evening. Up close, I could see he was quite old, perhaps mid-80s, but carried himself with dignity. His eyes were clear and keen beneath bushy white eyebrows. "Just taking a break," I explained. He nodded. "Too many people asking why a lovely young woman is alone?" I smiled despite myself. "Something like that." "Harold Miller," he introduced himself. "The groom's grandfather." "Melanie Parker," I replied, shaking his offered hand. "The bride's sister." "Ah, the doctor," he said. "I've heard about you." I braced myself for another comment about my career choices. Instead, he said, Boston Memorial, isn't it? Trauma surgery. Surprised, I nodded. Yes, that's right. He seemed about to say more when the wedding coordinator appeared, announcing that guests should move to the reception tent. Harold nodded politely and moved away, leaving me curious about his interest. The reception tent rivaled the pavilion in elegance. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, tables adorned with elaborate centerpieces, a dance floor positioned before a stage where a 12-piece band was setting up. Again, I noted the meticulous seating arrangements, couples everywhere, with me conspicuously alone at the end of the head table. As dinner began, I focused on the positive. The food was excellent, the speeches heartfelt, and Kimberly looked truly happy. If I occasionally caught Jessica and Thomas whispering and looking in my direction, I pretended not to notice. But as the evening progressed, the isolation grew more acute. The couple's first dance left me alone at the table. When family photos were taken, I stood awkwardly at the end of the line. During dinner, conversations naturally broke into pairs, leaving me the odd one out. It reminded me of countless social situations throughout my life. School dances where I'd been too focused on academics to secure a date, college parties where I'd felt out of place among more socially adept peers, medical school gatherings where exhaustion had made meaningful connections difficult. The culmination came during the bouquet toss. Kimberly, perhaps attempting to be kind, threw it directly at me. I caught it reflexively, then stood holding the flowers while single women half my age giggled around me. Returning to my seat, I overheard Jessica's cutting remark to her husband. God, what a waste. All that education and no one to share it with. Imagine dying alone in some sterile apartment surrounded by medical journals. Something inside me broke. I'd endured the subtle jabs, the pitying glances, the backhanded compliments, all for Kimberly's sake. But this direct attack on the life I'd built, the sacrifices I'd made, the people I'd saved, it was too much. I placed my napkin on the table and stood, intending to find a quiet place to compose myself before making excuses to leave early. As I passed the family table, Andrew stopped me. Leaving so soon, sis? He'd been calling me that all day, a forced familiarity that rang false. Just stepping out for some air, I said. You should have brought someone, he said, lowering his voice. It would have made things easier for everyone. Kim was worried you'd feel out of place. Even the groom felt entitled to comment on my personal life. I nodded stiffly and continued walking, aware of Kimberly's eyes following me, her expression a mixture of concern and embarrassment that her odd, single sister couldn't manage to fit in with her new perfect family. I slipped out of the tent, no longer caring who noticed my exit. The reception continued in full swing behind me as I made my way to a stone bench overlooking the rose garden. The music and laughter felt distant now, belonging to a world where I was clearly an outsider. I sat alone in the gathering dusk, contemplating the fastest way to exit gracefully, without disrupting Kimberly's perfect day. From my vantage point, I could see into the tent, the dancing couples, the animated conversations, the easy intimacy of people who belonged together. The head table where I'd been seated was conspicuously empty on one side, my side, the place setting a reminder of my solitary status. My phone buzzed with a text from the hospital, a colleague checking if I could cover a shift tomorrow. The familiar request was almost comforting, a reminder that somewhere I was valued, needed. I quickly replied that I'd be available, already calculating when I'd need to leave to make it back to Boston in time. Inside the tent, the band started playing a slow song. I watched as Andrew led Kimberly onto the dance floor, followed by their parents and other couples. The fairy tale scene only heightened my sense of exclusion. A server passed by, carrying a tray of champagne. I took a glass, sipping slowly, while mentally composing my excuse to Kimberly. Family emergency? Work crisis? Simple exhaustion? Each option seemed both plausible and pathetically transparent. Quite the spectacle, isn't it? I turned to find Jessica standing nearby, her own champagne glass in hand. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It's beautiful, I said neutrally. Andrew's family has excellent taste, and the means to indulge it. She sat uninvited beside me. You know, I've always wondered about people like you. People like me? Women who choose careers over family. She examined her manicure. Is it a deliberate choice, or just what happens when the alternative doesn't present itself? The question was designed to wound, cloaked in faux academic interest. Some of us find purpose beyond traditional roles, I said evenly. Purpose, yes. She nodded as though I'd confirmed something. But fulfillment? Connection? Love. She tilted her head. Seems like such a waste. There it was again, that word, waste. As though my life, my choices, my achievements meant nothing without a man to validate them. Do you know what I did yesterday morning, Jessica? I asked quietly. She blinked, thrown by the change in direction. I imagined something medical. I performed emergency surgery on a 16-year-old boy who'd been in a motorcycle accident. His aorta was partially severed. The mortality rate for that injury is over 90%. How graphic. She wrinkled her nose. He'll live, I continued. He'll graduate high school, go to college, maybe fall in love and get married someday. He has that chance because of what I do, because I chose this path. Jessica's expression hardened. No need to get defensive. I'm sure it's all very important. I just think there's more to life than work, that's all. And I think there's more to life than defining yourself through others, I countered. She stood abruptly. This conversation is becoming tedious. You should come back inside. People are noticing your absence and it's making Kimberly uncomfortable. The implication was clear once again. My failure to conform was creating problems for my sister. I remained seated. I'll be in shortly. Jessica shrugged and walked away, her dismissal complete. Alone again, I finished my champagne, the sweet liquid turning bitter on my tongue. Throughout the weekend, I'd maintained my composure, refused to let their judgments penetrate my carefully constructed armor. But now, exhaustion threatened to crack my defenses. What was I doing here? These people would never understand or respect my choices. To them, I would always be the odd one. The cautionary tale, the spinster sister devoted to her career because she couldn't secure a husband. The worst part was Kimberly's reaction, her tepid defense, her obvious embarrassment. We'd grown up together, shared secrets and dreams, supported each other through difficulties. Now she seemed to have absorbed her new family's perspective, viewing me through their judgmental lens. I stood, decision made. I would find Kimberly, make my excuses, and leave. The hospital needed me tomorrow, and I needed to return to a world where I made sense, where my contributions were valued. As I turned toward the tent, I saw Andrew and Kimberly making their way through the tables, stopping to chat with each group of guests. Their path would bring them to me soon, an opportunity to say goodbye. I waited, rehearsing my explanation. When they reached the edge of the garden, Andrew spotted me first. There she is, he called, the elusive Dr. Parker. Kimberly smiled, but I could see the question in her eyes. Why was I out here alone again? Just getting some fresh air, I explained as they approached. Well, don't disappear, Andrew said. We're making the rounds before the cake cutting. He lowered his voice conspiratorially. Between us, Grandpa Harold has been asking about you. Probably wants free medical advice. He laughed at his own joke. Actually, I began. I was thinking I might. You're not leaving? Kimberly interrupted, alarm crossing her features. It's not even 9 o'clock. I have a shift tomorrow, I said. The truth easier than invention. The hospital called. Can't someone else cover it? She asked, her disappointment evident. It's my wedding, Mel. Guilt washed over me. Was I being selfish, allowing my discomfort to overshadow her special day? Of course, I said, relenting. I'll stay for the cake. Relief softened her expression. Thank you. It means a lot having you here. Even if... She trailed off, perhaps realizing what she'd been about to say. Even if I didn't fit in. Even if I was alone. Even if I was an embarrassment. Andrew cleared his throat. We should continue our rounds. My mother's watching the clock. I nodded, forcing a smile as they moved on to the next group of guests. Returning to the tent felt like re-entering hostile territory, but I'd promised Kimberly I'd stay longer. Inside, I made my way back to my designated seat at the head table. The band was playing an upbeat song, the dance floor crowded with couples. At surrounding tables, guests chatted animatedly, their connections to each other evident in their body language and easy conversation. My place setting remained isolated, an island in the sea of togetherness. I sat down, reaching for my water glass, when I heard Thomas's voice from nearby. Should we rescue the poor doctor from her solitude? He asked someone, not bothering to lower his voice. It's becoming painful to watch. Leave her be, another voice responded, Eleanor's. She clearly prefers her own company. Kimberly says she's always been difficult, brilliant but no social graces. What a waste, Thomas repeated Jessica's earlier sentiment. She's not unattractive, just intense. No man wants to come home to a woman who's spent the day elbow deep in other people's organs. Their laughter cut through the music, reaching me with perfect clarity. I sat frozen, glass halfway to my lips, as the accumulated weight of the weekend's slights and insults finally became unbearable. Without conscious decision, I placed the glass down, stood, and began gathering my clutch and wrap. Pride be damned, I couldn't endure another minute of this treatment. Kimberly would have to understand. Some situations warranted retreat, and this was one of them. I just pushed in my chair when I noticed a stir at the family table. Harold Miller, Andrew's grandfather, was slowly rising to his feet, waving off assistance from those around him. His eyes, sharp despite his advanced years, were fixed directly on me. The tent grew quieter as Harold Miller stood fully upright. At 88, he moved with the deliberate care of someone who refused to surrender to age, his spine straight despite his years. He wore his tuxedo with the ease of a man who'd dressed formally his entire life, though I noticed his hands, liver-spotted and slightly trembling, gripped the edge of the table for support. I remained frozen, unsure why he'd chosen this moment to stand, uncertain if I should continue my retreat or wait to see what was happening. Around us, conversations hushed as guests noticed the family patriarch's unexpected movement. Harold stepped carefully away from the table, moving with purpose in my direction. His progress was slow but determined, his eyes never leaving my face. I felt a moment of panic. Had he somehow overheard my plans to leave early? Was he coming to express disapproval on behalf of the family? When he reached me, standing perhaps 3 feet away, he surprised me by speaking in a clear, carrying voice. "Dr. Parker," he said, using my professional title rather than my first name. "May I ask you something?" Conversations nearby halted completely as people turned to watch this unexpected interaction. "Of course," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite my discomfort at becoming the center of attention. "You work at Boston Memorial Hospital, in the trauma department?" "Yes, I'm a trauma surgeon there." He nodded, as though confirming something important. "How long have you been practicing?" By now, the entire tent had grown quiet. Even the band had stopped playing. The musician, sensing something significant was occurring. 7 years, I answered, increasingly confused by this public interrogation. I completed my residency at Massachusetts General and my fellowship at Boston Memorial. Harold's eyes never left mine. "Were you working the emergency department on January 14th of this year?" The specific date caught me off guard. I mentally reviewed my schedule, the trauma cases from 6 months ago. "Yes, I believe I was on call that weekend." Harold turned slightly, raising his voice to address the room more broadly. "On January 14th, a young woman was brought to Boston Memorial following a multi-car collision on I-93. Her injuries were catastrophic ruptured spleen, collapsed lungs, severe internal bleeding. The clinical description silenced the room completely." I searched my memory, the details crystallizing. "The accident occurred during a snowstorm," Harold continued. "The roads were nearly impassable. She'd been trapped in her vehicle for over 40 minutes before emergency services could extract her. By the time she reached the hospital, she had lost a dangerous amount of blood." I remembered the case now. A particularly challenging surgery during a blizzard that had stretched our resources thin. But why would Harold know these details? "The surgical team gave her a 10% chance of survival," he said, his voice growing emotional. But one surgeon refused to accept those odds. A chill ran through me as the connection suddenly became clear. "For 14 hours, that surgeon worked to repair the damage," Harold said. When the first approach failed, she tried another. When complications arose, she adapted. She transfused nearly twice the patient's blood volume. She refused to give up. Eleanor Miller had risen from her seat, her face pale. "Father, what are you?" Harold raised a hand, silencing her. The patient was my granddaughter, Lisa. A collective gasp rippled through the tent. I looked around, suddenly recognizing a young woman at the family table, Lisa Miller, whom I'd been introduced to briefly the previous day, but hadn't connected to my patient from January. She was watching the scene unfold with tears in her eyes. "The surgeon who saved Lisa's life," Harold continued, his voice breaking slightly, "was Dr. Melanie Parker." Every eye in the tent turned to me. I stood immobile, professional instinct keeping my expression neutral despite my shock. "I didn't know," I said quietly. "I didn't make the connection." Harold smiled. "No, you wouldn't have. You were simply doing your job." He turned again to address the room. "While some in this family have been whispering about Dr. Parker's choices, questioning her priorities, even mocking her for attending this wedding alone, they failed to recognize something crucial." The silence was absolute now. I could feel Jessica and Thomas's mortified gazes, Eleanor's stunned expression. "This woman," Harold said, gesturing toward me, "chose a path that saved my granddaughter's life. A path that has undoubtedly saved countless lives. A path that required sacrifice, dedication, and extraordinary skill." Then, to my complete astonishment, Harold Miller, patriarch of a family that valued status and tradition above all else, slowly and deliberately bowed before me. "This woman," he said, straightening with difficulty, "deserves our respect, not our mockery." Lisa rose from her seat and approached us, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't realize until Grandpa told me this morning," she said. "I remember your voice, though. You kept telling me to fight, that you wouldn't let me go." The memory flooded back, the critical moments when we'd nearly lost her, my refusal to accept defeat, talking to my unconscious patient as though she could hear me, urging her to hold on. "It was a team effort," I said automatically, the surgeon's standard deflection of praise. "But you led that team," Harold insisted. "You made the decisions that kept her alive." Eleanor had approached now, her composure visibly shaken. "Why didn't you say something?" she asked me. "All weekend, you never mentioned." "Doctor-patient confidentiality," I replied simply. And I didn't recognize Lisa. In the operating room, we focus on the injuries, not faces. "All this time," Eleanor murmured, realization dawning in her eyes. "You're that Dr. Parker, the one the hospital administrator mentioned when we sent the thank you donation." From across the tent, Andrew stared in disbelief. Beside him, Kimberly's expression shifted from confusion to dawning pride. Lisa took my hands in hers. "I'm alive because of you," she said simply. "I got to see my cousin marry your sister because of you." The weight of the moment overwhelmed me. Throughout my career, I'd maintained professional distance from patient outcomes, focusing always on the next case, the next life to save. But here, in this tent filled with people who had judged me for my choices, I was confronted with the tangible result of those choices. A vibrant young woman who would otherwise not be standing before me. "I was just doing my job," I repeated, unsure how else to respond. "A job that matters," Harold said firmly. He turned to address the stunned guests. "I've lived long enough to learn what truly deserves our admiration. It isn't social status or adherence to tradition." His gaze swept pointedly over certain family members. "It's the courage to pursue a path that serves others, even when that path is difficult or lonely." Jessica and Thomas had retreated to the periphery, their earlier mockery now casting them in a shameful light. I felt no triumph in their discomfort, only a quiet vindication that my choices had been seen finally, for what they were, not failings, but deliberate steps toward a meaningful purpose. Kimberly had made her way to my side, tears in her eyes. "Mel," she whispered. I had no idea. "It's okay," I told her, meaning it. "It's your wedding day. This shouldn't be about me." "But it is," she insisted. "You're my sister and I should have stood up for you more." Before I could respond, Harold spoke again. "I believe a change in seating is appropriate," he announced. "Dr. Parker will join our family table for the remainder of the evening. It wasn't a request. Despite his age, Harold Miller clearly remained the ultimate authority in the family. Eleanor quickly recovered her composure. "Of course," she said, her tone completely transformed. "We would be honored." As servers rushed to rearrange place settings, Harold offered me his arm with old-world courtesy. "If you'll permit an old man the pleasure of your company," he said. I accepted, allowing him to escort me to the family table. As we moved through the tent, guests watched with a mixture of confusion and newfound respect. The whispers now had an entirely different quality, not mocking, but impressed, even odd. The band resumed playing, the reception continued, but something fundamental had shifted. Where I had been invisible, I was now seen. Where I had been judged, I was now valued. At the family table, I found myself seated between Harold and Lisa, who wanted to hear more about the surgery that had saved her life. I explained the procedures in simplified terms, conscious of keeping the details appropriate for a wedding reception. "I never saw your face," Lisa said wonderingly. When I woke up 3 days later, different doctors were caring for me. "That's often how it works in trauma," I explained. "We stabilize patients, perform the critical interventions, then transition care to others for recovery." "Anonymous heroes," Harold commented. From across the table, Eleanor attempted conversation, her earlier condescension replaced with almost obsequious interest in my career. Andrew's father asked thoughtful questions about medical education. Even Jessica and Thomas, when they eventually rejoined the group, offered awkward apologies disguised as congratulations on my impressive work. I accepted it all with professional grace, neither gloating in their reversal nor holding grudges for their previous behavior. Throughout my career, I'd faced similar judgments, similar dismissals of my choices. This public vindication was satisfying, but it didn't change who I was or why I'd chosen my path. What mattered more was Kimberly's reaction. As the evening progressed, I caught her watching me with new eyes. Not embarrassment, but genuine pride. When the cake was cut, she insisted I stand beside her in the photographs. When she prepared to throw her bouquet, she winked at me and deliberately aimed away. "You don't need luck," she whispered. "You make your own destiny." As the reception continued into the night, Harold insisted on one more public gesture. During the father-daughter dance, he approached me. "I may not be as steady on my feet as I once was," he said, "but I would consider it an honor to share this dance with the woman who gave my family a future." And so I found myself dancing with an 88-year-old patriarch, his frail hand holding mine with surprising strength. "You know," he said quietly, "for my ears alone, success takes many forms, Dr. Parker. Some build families, others build businesses." His eyes, wise with decades of experience, met mine. "And some, like you, rebuild bodies and save lives. Never let anyone diminish the path you've chosen." In that moment, surrounded by people who had so recently judged me and now sought my approval, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't expected to find at this wedding. I had come alone, but I wasn't lonely. I had chosen a different path, but it wasn't a lesser one. And sometimes it took a stranger to help others see your true worth. The remainder of the reception unfolded in a way I could never have anticipated when I'd arrived at Windermere just a day earlier. Where I had been peripheral, I was now central to many conversations. Where I had been dismissed, I was now sought out. The transformation was as sudden as it was complete. Eleanor Miller, who had previously viewed me as an embarrassing anomaly, now introduced me to friends with undisguised pride. "This is Kimberly's sister, Dr. Parker, the trauma surgeon who saved our Lisa." The words flowed easily from her lips, as though she'd always held me in high esteem. I accepted this reversal with grace, neither dwelling on her previous behavior nor exploiting her current admiration. Years of navigating hospital politics had taught me that people's opinions were often fluid, shaped more by their own insecurities than by any objective assessment of others. After Harold's dance, several guests approached to share their own stories of medical interventions that had saved loved ones. An elderly woman clasped my hand, tears in her eyes as she described her grandson's recovery from a car accident. A middle-aged man thanked me on behalf of all trauma surgeons, explaining that his brother would not have survived a workplace accident without similar intervention. These genuine connections meant more to me than the sudden social acceptance from those who had mocked me hours earlier. They reinforced what I had always known but sometimes doubted during this weekend, that the path I had chosen mattered, regardless of how it aligned with traditional expectations. As the band played a final set of slower songs, I found a quiet moment with Kimberly near the dessert table. She looked radiant despite the long day, happiness bringing a glow to her features that no makeup could achieve. "I'm sorry, Mel," she said without preamble. "For what?" "For not standing up for you more. For caring too much about what Andrew's family thought." She picked up a chocolate-covered strawberry but didn't eat it. I was so focused on fitting in with them that I forgot who my real family is. "You were the bride," I said, letting her off the hook. "This weekend was supposed to be about you." "That's no excuse." She placed the strawberry back on its silver tray. "The truth is, I've always been a little jealous of you." This confession surprised me more than anything else that had happened. "Jealous? Of me?" She nodded. "You've always known exactly who you are and what you want. You never compromised, never settled. Meanwhile, I've spent my whole life trying to be what everyone else wanted." "You seemed happy doing it," I pointed out. "I thought you pitted me for being alone." "I worried about you," she corrected. "There's a difference. But I also admired you for having the courage to follow your own path, even when it was difficult." I considered her words, recognizing the truth in them. We had both made choices based on our values and personalities. Neither path was inherently superior, just different. "Do you love Andrew?" I asked quietly. Her smile was genuine. "Very much. He's a good man, even if his family is." She trailed off, glancing toward her new in-laws. "Complicated?" I supplied. "That's a diplomatic way of putting it." She laughed. "But he's not them. And after tonight, I think even they might be better than I gave them credit for. Harold, at least." "He's remarkable," I agreed. "Not many people his age would have the courage to challenge their entire family's behavior so publicly." "He comes from a different time," Kimberly said. When character mattered more than appearances, we stood in companionable silence, watching the remaining guests dance and socialize. The evening was winding down, the perfect wedding day nearly complete. "Will you stay through tomorrow?" Kimberly asked. "The farewell brunch?" I nodded. "I'm not due at the hospital until evening." "Good," she squeezed my hand. "I want my husband to get to know my amazing sister better." As if summoned by her words, Andrew appeared, his bow tie loosened, but his smile as bright as when he'd said his vows. "There's my two favorite Parker women," he said, putting an arm around Kimberly. He turned to me, his expression sincere. "I owe you an apology, Melanie. I made assumptions that were, well, they were wrong." "Water under the bridge," I assured him. "No, I need to say this." He seemed determined to clear the air. "I got caught up in my family's way of seeing the world, where everyone follows the same path, makes the same choices. I never stopped to consider that different choices could be equally valid, equally important." His words reflected a self-awareness I hadn't expected from him. Perhaps there was more substance to the man my sister had chosen than I'd initially recognized. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot." "Grandfather wants to speak with you before he retires for the evening," Andrew added. "He's by the entrance." I found Harold preparing to leave, a caregiver discreetly helping him with his coat. Despite the late hour, his eyes remained alert, his mind clearly sharp. "Dr. Parker," he greeted me, "I wanted to thank you again, not just for saving Lisa, but for reminding an old man what truly matters." "You did that yourself," I said. "It took courage to speak up as you did." He waved away my praise. "At my age, you stop fearing social consequences. The worst that can happen is someone doesn't invite you to their next garden party." His smile was mischievous. "Besides, I've been looking for an opportunity to shake up some of the more rigid thinking in this family for years." I laughed, appreciating his candor. "May I give you some unsolicited advice?" he asked. "Of course. Don't let anyone make you doubt your choices." His gaze was penetrating. "I've lived nearly 9 decades, and I've learned that regret comes not from the paths we take, but from the paths we abandon because others convince us they aren't worthy." "I'll remember that," I promised. And perhaps, he added with a twinkle in his eye, you might send me some of your research papers. I find myself with an interest in trauma medicine these days. I'd be honored. As Harold departed, I turned back to the reception, seeing it with new eyes. The judgments that had so wounded me earlier now seemed petty and irrelevant. I had built a life that saved others, that made a tangible difference in the world. That was worth celebrating, with or without a +1. Jessica and Thomas approached, their earlier mockery replaced with obvious discomfort. We wanted to apologize, Jessica began, her voice uncharacteristically humble. What we said was unforgivable. Not unforgivable, I corrected, just uninformed. We made assumptions, Thomas admitted, based on shallow values. I nodded, accepting their apology without needing to extract further contrition. We all have different measures of success, I told them. The important thing is to recognize that diversity of paths enriches all our lives. Their relief at my lack of vindictiveness was palpable. As they moved away, I noticed Eleanor watching the exchange, her expression thoughtful. Our eyes met briefly, and she inclined her head slightly. Not quite an apology, but an acknowledgement. It was enough. The reception was ending now, guests departing with warm wishes for the newlyweds. I helped Kimberly change into her going-away outfit. The sisters we had always been beneath the day's formalities. Promise you'll visit us in Newport this summer, she said as I zipped her dress. We'll have the guest house ready by July. I'll check my schedule, I promised, though I can't guarantee I won't get called away for an emergency. I wouldn't expect anything less. She hugged me tightly. That's who you are? And I love you for it. We rejoined Andrew for their grand departure, guests lining the driveway with sparklers illuminating the night. I stood with the family, no longer an outsider, but recognized as an integral part of the celebration. Later, as I returned to my room in the quiet house, I reflected on the weekend's journey. I had arrived feeling defensive about my choices, prepared to endure judgment for the path I had chosen. I was leaving with something unexpected, a renewed confidence in that path, and the knowledge that true respect is earned not through conformity, but through living authentically. The next morning, I drove back to Boston alone, but not lonely. My phone contained new connections, Harold's email address, Lisa's number, even a tentative invitation from Eleanor to speak at a hospital charity event she chaired. More importantly, I carried a deeper understanding of my own worth, independent of relationship status or traditional metrics of success. I had built a life dedicated to healing others, to fighting death in its most urgent manifestations. That life might not include a partner or children, at least not now, but it was rich with purpose and meaning. As the hospital came into view, my hospital, my professional home, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Here, I wasn't defined by who accompanied me or whose arm I held. I was defined by my skills, my knowledge, my commitment to preserving life in its most fragile moments. Some might still see that as a lonely existence, but as I parked my car and prepared to enter the familiar halls where I had found my calling, I knew the truth. There are many ways to build a meaningful life, many ways to create family, many ways to leave a legacy. And sometimes it takes a stranger's bow to help others see the value in the path you've chosen. Have you ever been judged for making unconventional life choices? How did you respond? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Remember, your worth isn't defined by whether you conform to others' expectations. It's defined by the impact you make in your own unique way. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you always find the courage to walk your own path, regardless of who understands it.